Hey everybody, what's going on? It was another interesting week for the Montreal Canadiens who are coming off of a 4-2 loss to the Boston Bruins last night. It was an interesting game because the Montreal Canadiens actually outplayed the Boston Bruins in that matchup despite having all the injuries that they do have and basically boasting an AHL roster with a bunch of fill-ins included as well. Nick Suzuki continued his hot stretch of play where he recorded his third straight multi-point game and he looks to be on pace to set a new career high in points, which is a nice accomplishment in a very much lost season for the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had right now when it comes to the Habs, and that's how long are they going to need to rebuild when it comes to their current plan and how Kent Hughes views where they are in their rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it. He recently spoke with The Athletic, and by what he was saying, it sounds like the team is 2 or 3 years out from at least competing for a playoff position. And I think that's really smart to get that kind of message out there to the fans right now. Let them know this isn't over yet. We're still in the middle of it. There's still some bad times to come before the good times can start to prosper. So I think that's a really important message to get out there in his little media tour that he spoke with Sportsnet and The Athletic of late. So I think that's important kind of messaging to let the fans know, hey, this isn't done yet. We still have work to do. There's still going to be some high draft picks in our near future, and we need to hit on those draft picks. We need to develop them properly and then move forward as an organization. When you look at the Montreal Canadiens forward core, there's some sure things at least moving forward for what the team wants to do, whether that's Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach. You would like to include Uri Slafkovsky in that mix as well. Whether they or not they decide to trade Josh Anderson will factor into how he fits in their top six as well. But there's some pieces there right now, at least for the time being, that will factor into how this team competes in 3, 4, or 5 years down the line. And I think that's important. They have those building blocks to at least start the process, but there's still more pieces that need to be added as well. If you look up front, I think a lot's going to depend on how they decide to build this team up the middle of the ice. And one of those factors that could contribute into what the Montreal Canadiens are building is Pierre-Luc Dubois with the Winnipeg Jets. I know that the Montreal Canadiens have had some trade talks with Winnipeg about Dubois and his availability in this coming off season because that'll be the last year he'll be under contract for the Jets and then he can test free agency after that. And I'm sure Kent Hughes would be wise to not pay a big price to acquire him. I think Anderson moving in a deal like that could be smart business from the Montreal Canadiens. You get a strong asset and a two-way centerman in Pierre-Luc Dubois on the Montreal Canadiens, and you send Anderson the other way, a player with term that can kind of stay in Winnipeg and help build a new culture around that organization. So I think Dubois would be a great fit in Montreal, but I don't know if they're willing to pay the assets that will be needed to get him before free agency, and I think that could factor into how they see this plan moving forward as well. As we know, there's no guarantees. You hear players say things like that all the time. Maybe not as much as the noise surrounding Dubois has created in Montreal because of the headlines it's manufactured, but Dubois would be a very important piece for what the Habs could build down the middle. I think just of late, what you're seeing from Kirby Dach, especially with his resilience after coming back from injury over the last 2 games, and he looks like the exact same player that he did beforehand. He looks like he's going to be at worst a second line center in the NHL, and he had a very bargain contract right now, so the Montreal Canadiens will have to take advantage of those years moving forward. And I think that Dubois, Suzuki, and Dach could be a great fit down the middle of the ice. If they ultimately decide to move one to wing, great. That just means the top six is going to be ultimately stronger, and they're going to add some players in the next 2 draft classes as they're likely to have top 10 selections in those drafts as well. This year, it looks like they're going to have at least a top 6 pick, and that's going to be an important building block for what they try to do in terms of their young talent moving forward. I think that they're also going to have another top 15 or 16 selection with the Florida Panthers pick, and they need to hit on these selections and develop them properly. I'm not so much keen on who they pick, more so how they develop these players. Of course, I have my preferences as to who I'd like them to pick in that top 6 spot, but my selection honestly means nothing to what the brass is going to decide. So I'd like for them to just focus on that development. It appears that they're doing that with Adam Nichols as the helm, and he's playing an important role in deciding how this team moves forward with their player development. And you're seeing that with the likes of some of the players in junior hockey right now, whether it's a Riley Kidney, a Joshua Waugh. You're seeing new things added to their game that are from the Montreal Canadiens player development staff that they weren't doing last season. And I think that's integral in terms of how they're going to develop these pieces moving forward. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below how long you think the Montreal Canadiens will take to compete for a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, and whether you think what Kent Hughes said about being 2 to 3 years away is realistic. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.